Welcome to the battlefield of wealth, where money never sleeps. This is Greedonomics.
What happens when one of the most respected companies in America stops prioritizing engineering and starts prioritizing profits? A company trusted with millions of lives. A company whose airplanes carried presidents, astronauts, business leaders, and ordinary families across the globe. A company that helped America win wars, dominate the skies, and become an aviation superpower. That company was Boeing. But over the last decade, Boeing has become the center of one of the biggest corporate disasters in modern history. 2 deadly plane crashes. Hundreds of lives lost, billions of dollars wiped out. Whistleblowers speaking out. Government investigations. And a reputation built over more than a century suddenly hanging by a thread. The shocking question is, did Boeing's obsession with Wall Street profits slowly destroy the very culture that made it great? This is the story of how an American icon lost its way. This is the Boeing collapse. For most of the 20th century, Boeing wasn't just another company. It was America. Founded in 1916 by William Boeing, the company grew from a small aircraft manufacturer into one of the most important industrial giants in the world. When people thought about aviation, they thought about Boeing. Its aircraft carried millions of passengers. Its military planes protected nations. Its innovations pushed the boundaries of engineering. The Boeing 707 helped launch the jet age. The Boeing 747 became known as the Queen of the Skies. For decades, Boeing engineers were considered among the best in the world. Inside the company, one principle mattered above everything else: safety first. Engineers held enormous influence. If something wasn't safe, it wasn't flying. That philosophy earned Boeing something priceless: trust. Airlines trusted Boeing. Pilots trusted Boeing. Passengers trusted Boeing. And for many years, that trust was deserved. But by the 1990s, a major challenge emerged. Across the Atlantic, a European competitor was rapidly gaining strength. Its name was Airbus. And Airbus wasn't interested in being second place anymore. The competition between Boeing and Airbus would soon reshape the aviation industry forever. At first, Boeing maintained its lead. But Airbus continued gaining market share. Its aircraft became more efficient. More airlines started choosing Airbus. And Boeing executives began feeling pressure from investors and shareholders. Pressure to grow faster. Pressure to increase profits. Pressure to keep Wall Street happy. Then came a decision that many former Boeing employees would later describe as the turning point. The decision that changed Boeing forever. In 1997, Boeing merged with a company called McDonnell Douglas. On paper, Boeing was the buyer. But many critics argue that culturally, the opposite happened. McDonnell Douglas had a very different philosophy. Its leadership focused heavily on costs, efficiency, and shareholder returns. Former Boeing employees would later claim that after the merger, the company's culture began to shift. Slowly. Quietly. But dramatically. The engineers who once dominated decision-making began losing influence. Financial executives gained power. Cost-cutting became increasingly important. Shareholder value became the primary objective. Former Boeing engineer and executive critics would later argue that the company gradually transformed from an engineering-driven organization into a finance-driven corporation. And while the change wasn't obvious at first, the consequences would eventually become impossible to ignore. For years, Boeing continued making profits. Its stock price climbed. Investors were happy. Executives received enormous compensation packages. Everything looked successful from the outside. But beneath the surface, something dangerous was happening. The company that once obsessed over safety was beginning to obsess over speed. And nowhere would that become more apparent than in Boeing's battle against Airbus. A battle that would lead directly to one of the deadliest corporate failures in aviation history. Because in the early 2010s, Airbus launched a new aircraft that threatened Boeing's dominance. Airlines loved it. Orders flooded in. And Boeing executives suddenly felt trapped. They needed an answer. Fast. Very fast. What happened next would change aviation forever. And it would ultimately cost hundreds of people their lives. In the last chapter, we saw how Boeing transformed from an engineering-driven company into one increasingly focused on financial performance. But that cultural shift wouldn't truly be tested until one competitor forced Boeing into the most important business decision in its history. That competitor was Airbus. And the battle between these two aviation giants would ultimately change commercial aviation forever. By the early 2010s, Airbus had become a serious rival. Its A320 family of aircraft was already popular with airlines around the world. Then Airbus made a game-changing announcement. It introduced the A320neo, a more fuel-efficient version of its best-selling aircraft. Thanks to new generation engines, airlines could save millions of dollars on fuel over the life of each airplane. For airline executives, the choice was obvious. Lower fuel costs meant higher profits. Orders for the A320neo poured in almost overnight. Within months, Airbus had secured hundreds of new aircraft orders. Inside Boeing's headquarters, alarm bells were ringing. Executives feared losing billions of dollars in future business. They had two choices. The first option was to design an entirely new aircraft. That would produce a modern airplane, but development would likely take close to a decade and cost billions of dollars. The second option was much faster. Modify the existing Boeing 737. Deliver it quickly. And stop airlines from switching to Airbus. Boeing chose speed. The company announced the 737 MAX, an upgraded version of its decades-old 737 design. Instead of starting from scratch, Boeing installed larger, more fuel-efficient engines on the existing aircraft. On paper, it looked like the perfect solution. Airlines could continue flying Boeing aircraft without spending years retraining pilots. Boeing could bring the airplane to market much faster than building an entirely new jet. Wall Street loved the decision. Orders quickly returned. Investors celebrated. But there was one major engineering problem. The new engines were significantly larger than the originals. Because the 737 sat relatively low to the ground, engineers had to mount the engines farther forward and slightly higher on the wing. That seemingly small design change affected the airplane's aerodynamics. During certain high-angle climbs, the aircraft's nose could naturally pitch upward more than previous 737 models. It wasn't uncontrollable. But Boeing wanted the MAX to handle similarly to earlier 737 versions. Their solution would become one of the most controversial software systems in aviation history. To address this handling characteristic, Boeing introduced a flight control feature called the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, better known as MCAS. Its purpose was straightforward. If the aircraft sensed that the nose was rising too much under specific conditions, MCAS would automatically command the horizontal stabilizer to trim the nose downward. In principle, automated safety systems are common in modern aviation. But the way MCAS was implemented would later face intense scrutiny. According to later investigations, the original version of MCAS relied heavily on data from a single angle of attack sensor during activation in the accident scenarios. If that sensor sent incorrect information, MCAS could activate even when the aircraft wasn't actually approaching a stall. Pilots were not given extensive information about MCAS during initial transition training. Many believed they were simply flying another version of the familiar 737. For Boeing, that was also a selling point. Less additional training meant lower costs for airline customers. The aircraft entered service. Everything appeared normal. Until October 2018. On the morning of October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 departed from Jakarta, Indonesia. Shortly after takeoff, the crew experienced unexpected flight control problems. The aircraft repeatedly pushed its nose downward. The pilots fought to keep the airplane climbing. Again. And again. They pulled back on the control column. Moments later, the nose dropped once more. The struggle continued for several minutes. Then the aircraft plunged into the Java Sea. All 189 people on board lost their lives. At first, investigators didn't know exactly what had happened. Was it pilot error, mechanical failure, maintenance, or something else entirely? As investigators recovered data from the flight recorders, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Evidence suggested that faulty sensor data had triggered repeated MCAS activations. The pilots were battling not only an emergency. They were battling the airplane itself. The crash shocked the aviation industry. But Boeing maintained that the 737 MAX remained safe to fly. The company issued guidance reminding airlines of existing procedures for handling erroneous stabilizer trim inputs. Regulators did not immediately ground the aircraft worldwide. Flights continued. Millions of passengers boarded the 737 MAX over the following months. Many believed the tragedy was an isolated event. But behind the scenes, investigators were still asking difficult questions. Could a single faulty sensor really trigger repeated nose-down commands? Why hadn't pilots received more detailed information about MCAS? And had commercial pressure influenced critical design decisions? Those questions would soon become impossible to ignore. Because just a few months later, history would repeat itself. This time, in front of the entire world. After the Lion Air tragedy, Boeing assured airlines, regulators, and the public that the 737 MAX was safe. Flights continued around the world. Millions of passengers boarded the aircraft without knowing that investigators were still trying to understand what had happened. Then, less than 5 months later, the unthinkable happened again. March 10, 2019. It was a clear Sunday morning in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 had just taken off on its journey to Nairobi, Kenya. On board were 157 passengers and crew from more than 30 different countries. Many were business travelers. Some were families. Others were humanitarian workers heading to international missions. Within minutes of takeoff, something went terribly wrong. The pilots reported flight control problems and requested permission to return to the airport. But they never made it back. The aircraft crashed into a field just minutes after departure. No one survived. For the second time in less than 5 months, a brand new Boeing 737 MAX had crashed shortly after takeoff. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Investigators immediately began comparing the Ethiopian crash with Lion Air Flight 610. The more they looked, the more the two disasters appeared connected. Both aircraft were brand new. Both experienced problems shortly after takeoff. Both showed repeated nose-down movements. Both crews struggled desperately to regain control. Flight recorder data later revealed striking similarities in the sequence of events. Attention quickly focused once again on MCAS. What had first seemed like a possible isolated accident was now looking like a systemic design problem, and suddenly, the entire aviation industry faced an urgent question: could every Boeing 737 MAX in the world be at risk? Countries began taking action. China was among the first major aviation authorities to suspend 737 MAX operations. One by one, regulators across Europe, Asia, Australia, Canada, and many other nations followed. Airlines grounded their fleets. Flights were cancelled. Passengers were rebooked. Pressure mounted on U.S. regulators. Initially, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, continued to say there wasn't enough evidence to ground the aircraft. But as new satellite tracking data and accident evidence emerged, the pressure became overwhelming. On March 13, 2019, the United States also grounded every Boeing 737 MAX. For the first time in Boeing's history, its newest flagship aircraft had been grounded worldwide. Hundreds of airplanes sat idle on airport ramps across the globe. Production slowed. Deliveries stopped. The crisis had become impossible to contain. Investigators from multiple countries started examining every aspect of the aircraft. How had MCAS been designed? Why did it rely on limited sensor input in the accident scenarios? Why hadn't pilots been fully informed about the system? How had regulators approved the aircraft? Congress launched investigations. Journalists uncovered internal documents. Former employees began speaking publicly. Some described a workplace that had changed dramatically over the years. According to testimony and later reports, many engineers felt that schedules and costs were receiving increasing attention. Some employees claimed concerns about safety were not always given the priority they deserved. Boeing, however, stated that safety remained its highest priority and said it was committed to learning from the accidents and improving the aircraft. The debate over what went wrong had only just begun. As investigations continued, internal company communications became public. Some messages painted an uncomfortable picture. In one widely reported exchange, employees criticized aspects of the aircraft's development and certification process. Those messages fueled public concern. Critics argued they reflected deeper cultural problems inside the company. Supporters of Boeing argued that private conversations didn't necessarily represent the company as a whole. But regardless of interpretation, public confidence continued to fall. Airlines faced difficult questions from passengers. Families of crash victims demanded accountability. Lawmakers demanded answers. And Boeing's reputation, built over more than a century, was unraveling faster than anyone imagined. The consequences were enormous. Boeing stopped delivering new 737 MAX aircraft. Manufacturing slowed dramatically. Compensation claims from airlines began piling up. Lawsuits from victims' families followed. The company lost tens of billions of dollars through production disruptions, settlements, compensation, and other costs linked to the crisis. Its stock price suffered. Investors who had once celebrated Boeing's success now watched one of America's greatest manufacturers struggle through its deepest crisis in decades. What had started as an engineering decision had become a corporate disaster. The public wanted someone to blame. Was it faulty software? Poor engineering decisions? Weak regulatory oversight? Corporate pressure? Or a combination of all of them? Investigators continued searching for answers. Boeing worked on redesigning MCAS, updating software, improving pilot training, and addressing regulatory concerns. But even if the aircraft could be fixed, there was one thing far more difficult to repair: trust. Because in aviation, trust is everything. And once it's broken, winning it back can take years. By late 2020, Boeing believed the nightmare was finally coming to an end. After nearly 2 years of investigations, software redesigns, engineering reviews, and additional pilot training requirements, the 737 MAX gradually returned to service in many countries. Executives hoped the crisis was behind them. Airlines slowly began flying the aircraft again. Passengers started returning. It seemed like Boeing had survived the worst chapter in its history. But fate had one more shock waiting. And this time, the entire world would witness it on camera. January 5, 2024. An Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 took off from Portland, Oregon, on what should have been a routine domestic flight. Just minutes after takeoff, a loud explosion echoed through the cabin. A panel known as a door plug suddenly separated from the aircraft. The cabin rapidly depressurized. Oxygen masks dropped. Personal belongings were sucked out of the airplane. Passengers screamed. Parents desperately held on to their children. Thankfully, the pilots remained calm. They declared an emergency and safely returned the aircraft to Portland. Miraculously, there were no fatalities, but the images spread across the internet within hours. For millions of people, the question immediately returned: how could this happen, again? Regulators moved quickly. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board began investigating the incident. The Federal Aviation Administration increased oversight of Boeing's manufacturing and quality control processes. The investigation later found that the door plug had been installed without the retaining bolts that were intended to secure it after repair work. That discovery shocked both regulators and the public. This wasn't another software issue. It pointed toward manufacturing and production quality. Once again, Boeing found itself answering uncomfortable questions. How had such a critical assembly left the factory? What quality checks had failed? And had production pressure once again overtaken safety? As scrutiny intensified, current and former Boeing employees came forward with additional concerns about manufacturing practices and quality culture. Some alleged that production deadlines sometimes created pressure inside the organization. Others said they believed stronger quality controls were needed. Boeing responded that it encouraged employees to report concerns, was strengthening its safety culture, and remained committed to continuous improvement. Regardless of where the truth ultimately landed on every individual claim, public confidence suffered another major blow. For many passengers, Boeing's name no longer represented innovation. It represented uncertainty. The financial consequences stretched far beyond a single aircraft. Billions of dollars were lost through production delays, legal settlements, compensation, and operational disruptions. Airlines had to adjust schedules. Manufacturers across Boeing's supply chain felt the impact. Shareholders watched years of value disappear. Leadership changes followed. The company faced increasing pressure from regulators, lawmakers, airlines, investors, and the flying public. But perhaps the greatest loss couldn't be measured on a balance sheet. It was trust. Trust takes decades to build, but only moments to destroy. Despite everything, Boeing remains one of the world's most important aerospace companies. Its aircraft continue to carry millions of passengers. Thousands of talented engineers and employees work every day to build safe airplanes. The company is investing in improving manufacturing quality, strengthening oversight, and rebuilding confidence. Whether those efforts ultimately restore public trust will be decided not by advertising, but by consistent performance over many years. Because in aviation, every flight is a promise. And every passenger expects that promise to be kept. The Boeing collapse isn't just the story of one corporation. It's a warning to every business, every executive, every investor, and every leader. Profit is essential. Innovation is essential. Growth is essential. But when profit begins replacing purpose, and speed begins replacing responsibility, even the strongest companies can lose everything that made them great. In the end, Boeing didn't become a global icon because it chased profits. It became a global icon because people trusted its engineering. The real challenge now isn't building the next airplane, it's rebuilding the trust that once made Boeing the gold standard of aviation. And that may be the hardest mission in the company's entire history.